Hi everyone, welcome to Make It Monday. So today we're going to create a mixed media art piece. And what mixed media is it's taking different type of art media such as paint and paper and collage techniques and texture and adding those all together in one art piece. So it's kind of an anything goes type of thing. It's a very free type of art form. So today we are going to create this piece of mixed media art. So we have a lot to do. We're going to get started. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create our painted background. So everybody has a piece of canvas, and this is canvas that we purchased that was already pre-gessoed. What gesso is it's kind of a white paint that they put on canvas to kind of prep it for doing the mixed media stuff. So these canvases are already pre-gessoed. You don't have to worry about that. So in your kit, you are going to find some white paint, some blue paint, some green paint, and a kind of creamy yellow paint. And what I want you to do is take some white paint and a dab of blue, some white paint and a dab of green to create a lighter shade than what I have here. So I am just going to mix that up with my paintbrush. And you can make this as light or as dark as you want. But keep in mind that you really want your background to stay in the background. You don't want it to overwhelm what your focal point is going to be, which is going to be the flower. So I've got some blue mixed up there. I'm just going to take and mix up my green. And then the cream is going to kind of be the in-between color between the two. Okay, so I'm going to start with my blue, and I'm going to take, everybody's got a foam brush. I'm going to take my foam brush, and I'm going to just start putting that paint on. And sometimes it pays to have your foam brush just a little bit wet. So what you can do is get your foam brush wet and then just kind of squeeze the excess water out onto a paper towel. So it's good to have some paper towels handy. So you're just going to coat your whole piece here. And I think I'm going to have to mix up more than I made here. And it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of the white show through. It's more your preference of what you like. I'm just going to take and mix up some more of this blue. Add a little bit more blue to that. There we go. Clean off my brush on here so I'm not wasting all that paint. And I will pick up some more of that. And so we're going to kind of work in thirds on this canvas. So the blue is going to kind of come a third down. I got a piece of dry paint in there, so I'm just going to pick that up with my fingers and pull it off of there. Okay, so we've got our third of the blue done. I'm going to kind of go over a couple more areas up here to make sure I've got a good coating. And then we're going to move on to the next color, which is going to be the cream color. All right, so I'm going to clean my brush off good so I don't have that blue paint in there. And then I'm going to kind of dry it off between two paper towels. So I don't know if you can see me do that. I've just got a couple paper towels here and I'm just squeezing out the excess water. Okay, so next we're going to move on to our cream. And that's just going to be kind of an in-between layer in here. Pick up some more of that. And it can kind of go up into the blue. You can kind of mix them up a little bit there. Again, I got a piece of dry paint in there. My paints are a little bit older. Alright, hopefully you guys can see this okay. Kind of tip it. Add more blue just to kind of mix in on that line so I get a nice blend between the two areas. All right, now we're going to clean our brush again, and we're going to do the bottom half, which will be green. Again, I'm going to squeeze the excess water out of my foam brush here. And then we're going to go into our green. So you want just a nice even coat all the way across. And again, I didn't mix up quite enough. So mix up a little bit more. So yeah, learn from this. Mix a little bit more than you think you need, which is okay. That's part of the art process. You just kind of roll with it. Okay, again, I'm gonna put the excess paint that I had on my brush down here. I'm gonna flip this just so that I can get that bottom edge without my fingers in the way. So I'm just holding it on the bottom with my hand. And then careful of your sides. If you get some goopy paint on the sides, just kind of smooth that out with your brush. I'm going to kind of work up into that cream a little bit again, just to kind of get a nice blend all the way across my canvas piece. And I don't mind this, you know, sometimes it looks a little streaky. I don't mind that because I sometimes think it gives it depth. All right, make sure I've got things kind of smoothed out here. I've got one spot of cream here that's kind of darker than I want it to be. So I'm just going to kind of take a damp paintbrush here and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. Okay, I got a little bit up here too that I'm not. I think my fingers got in the way a little bit. Again, mixed media art, anything goes. You know, it doesn't have to be, you're not working for a perfection painting or anything like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Now you need to let this sit and dry. And how you'll know it's dry, if it doesn't feel cool to the touch anymore, then you'll know it's completely dry. So we're going to take a break. We're going to let this dry, and I will meet you back to continue on. Okay, so our canvas is now dry. I can touch my canvas. It feels dry, not cool at all. So the next thing we're going to work on is adding some layers and texture. So what we're going to do is, you can kind of see in the main print here that we've got some wording kind of in the background. So how we're going to achieve that, in your kit you will find 4 pieces of tissue paper with stamped wording on it, and you'll also find a piece of tissue paper with the sentiment that I put on there. And you can use as much of this or as little of this as you want. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your piece of stamped tissue paper, and what I did is I stamped it. This is just a rubber stamp that I own with just some wording on it. It's French script. It doesn't really mean anything to me since I don't read French. And I stamped it with an archival ink. And what an archival ink is it's a waterproof permanent ink. And because Mod Podge is water-based, you need a waterproof ink. So I just inked it up. This is what they call a hickory smoke color, so it's kind of a darker gray color, because I wanted it to kind of blend in the background. For the sentiment, I actually stamped it in a black archival ink. And this is just regular gift wrap tissue, same as you would find in any store. So it's no kind of fancy tissue. So what we want to do is take and tear this into pieces. You don't want, you know, a cut edge. So you're going to take this and you are going to just tear it into pieces. And It can be big pieces, it can be little pieces. The only thing I suggest is that there's no edge that looks like it's cut, because that sometimes does show up. So you've got 4 pieces like that. I'm going to just put that aside, and I went through and I tore up all my other pieces. So get rid of that. And then we're going to take our Mod Podge. This is a matte Mod Podge, so it's not going to be shiny. When I open my Mod Podge, I like to put plastic wrap over it. It helps it stay better. I'm going to use it right out of the jar. And then I've also put just a piece of wax paper on my surface. I just don't want to get Mod Podge all over my cutting mat. So how you're going to lay this on is you're going to, and this is just random, you don't need to put it on in any specific order. I kind of just figure out where I want it. You kind of know you're going to have your flower down here. So you might want to put some on the bottoms and in the corners, but you probably don't want to put some right in the middle there. So I'm going to put a thin layer of Mod Podge down. I am going to lay my script right on top of it, and don't be worried if your tissue paper crinkles up. That just adds texture. And then you're going to put a light layer of Mod Podge right over the top. And if you have some pieces that are hanging over the edge, just put a little Mod Podge on the back and just turn that over and push it down. So we're going to just continue on in this, and then also know that your sentiment's going to kind of go up in here. If you don't want to use the sentiment, that's no problem. Then you can just fill in with anything, more pieces of this if you want. So I want to make sure that I leave kind of a spot open for that sentiment area to go. So take another piece, and I'm just going to lay that down, kind of smooth it out with my fingers. I don't need that big a tail, so I'm going to tear that off. And then again, I'm going to take a nice thin layer of Mod Podge and go right over the top. It is a little bit crooked, but we're just going to go with it. All right, I'm going to put some down here in this corner a little bit. Going to add some more of that. Smooth it out. I'm just going to tear this a little bit so I don't have as big a tail there. And again, I'm going to put another layer over the top. Flip that over, add a little bit of Mod Podge, push that down. And you're just going to continue on in this fashion until you have as much of this on there as you want. Put kind of a bigger piece down here. Smooth that out. Add some more Mod Podge. Flip that over. Push that back down in. And what's nice about the tissue paper is that your background color still comes through. It doesn't totally cover up. It kind of blends into the background, which is why I chose the gray to add. I also like to make sure that I'm kind of going off the edges so things look a little more random and not quite like everything is in the middle. So I do like to make sure that I'm off the edges in certain areas. Flip that. Another good reason to have the wax paper there, then it doesn't totally stick to your surface. Let's see, where do I want some more? Let's take just a tiny, this is where sometimes the tiny little pieces work really well, because you can kind of plop them up into the corners. Put that up there. Whoop. And let's see, where else do I want some? Maybe just a little bit more way down here. Let's smooth this one on here. And I even think I might have that upside down, but with this kind of writing, it just doesn't matter. You just put it on. Again, flip it over a little bit. Let's see. Maybe another piece right over here. My flower might cover it up, but that's okay. All right. Put that over. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to stop there for now. Make sure that you wash your brush out in between. That Mod Podge will harden on your brush and then you'll have a really hard brush. So make sure you just go wash this out with some water and then kind of squeeze it between a paper towel to get any excess water off. So again, we're going to set this aside. We're going to let it dry, and then the next stage we'll be coming back and adding our flower pieces. So we'll see you back in a few minutes. Okay, we're back for the next step. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add our flower petals, which there should be 6 of them that are cut out of an old book page. You'll have a centerpiece, and then we're also at this point going to add our sentiment up in the top. So the first thing I'm going to do is again tear around this sentiment, and what I do is I kind of hold my thumb so that I don't end up tearing the actual wording. So I just kind of use my thumb as a guide, and I'm just going to kind of tear around that so that I don't accidentally tear the actual wording of the sentiment. So I've got that ready, and I'm going to set that aside. And then I'm going to kind of start laying my flower petals on here. Now this is, you can kind of position this any way you want. You'll have 6 petals, and some of them are going to hang off the end of the page. So what I like to do is lay them out first, so I kind of have an idea where I want these. So I'm going to kind of just position, and it's okay if they run off the end of the page. If you notice on the original one, I have that running off the end of the page. So there is no, if you want it to cover the whole page, then by all means go ahead and do that. So I'm just, again, kind of getting my placement for these, knowing that I've got to have a sentiment up there. So this takes just a little bit of finagling to try and get these kind of where I want them, so that they're somewhat even. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Get my points centered in there. Okay, so what I do is I kind of leave them in this position. And I grab my brush and I get some Mod Podge on there. And then I usually just, but they won't stick, kind of just pick it up and brush some Mod Podge under there. And then I'm just going to place that down. Actually, I want the wording to go this way. Okay, and then again, I'm going to put a thin layer, smooth that down a little bit, push it down with your fingers, and then put another layer of Mod Podge over the top. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my next one. I'm going to kind of decide which way I want that to go. When I work with lettering, it kind of depends on what you want. I kind of like it to be how you would read it. So again, I'm going to place that down. Kind of smooth that down with my finger. And once you have a couple of these petals down, it makes it easier. So if you want to pick up some of your other petals just to get them out of the way, like I'm going to just slide that out of the way. Okay, so next I'm actually going to just slide these down a little bit, and I'm going to put my centerpiece in there. Just because that will kind of anchor everything, and I'll know kind of what I'm butting up against, the petals are going to butt up against. So again, press that down, thin layer of Mod Podge over the top. And you're going to just keep going around in this fashion until you get all of your petals down. Place that down. Make sure I got Mod Podge over here. Push that down. And if you notice, okay, so I've got a few bubbles that are coming up underneath my Mod Podge. Go ahead and just, if you start seeing those, just push them down with your finger. Okay, so again, I'm going to push that down good. Layer of Mod Podge over the top. And I don't want too thick of layer of Mod Podge, you know, enough to keep it in place. But we're going to put a wash of color over the top of these petals, so I don't want that Mod Podge to be too thick that we can't get our color on there. Okay, let's see. I think we'll go with this one. Place that down, smooth it down a little bit with my finger. Layer of Mod Podge over the top. All right, 2 more petals to go. And as I'm placing these with 6 petals, it makes it kind of easy because you can kind of go opposite on your project here to make sure that you've got, I'm just going to make sure I've got that where I've got enough room to put that last one on there. Okay, again, I'm going to smooth that out a little bit with my fingers. Add another layer. Okay, here I've got some bubbles starting to show, so I'm going to just smooth that out quick with my finger. Okay, this one that's going to wrap underneath, it's not too much to wrap, so I'm not going to cut it. I'm just going to bend that over with my finger. And because the book paper is a little bit thicker, sometimes you really got to push it down there. Okay, I got a bubble starting there. So again, I'm going to just smooth that out with my finger. And it's not that the bubbles are bad, I just prefer it to be glued down. The bubbles will add texture, so don't be afraid of that. If you don't, you know, if you come back and it's dried and it's got a big bubble in there, don't worry about it. Again, this is a free-flowing medium. It's not meant to be totally perfect. Okay. All right, so this last one, there's quite a bit hanging over the top. So I'm going to just set my brush on top of there. I'm going to take my scissors, pick that up a little bit, and I'm going to just trim part of this off. All right, so now we're going to again put a layer over the top. Okay, I'm also going to take and just put a little bit of Mod Podge on the back of the paper and on the back of the board and just wrap that around. Okay, it doesn't want to stay, so we're just going to make it stay. Okay, get that push down there. If I lay the board down flat again, that'll help hold it in place. Okay, now we're going to add our sentiment up here since we kind of know where our flower is situated. It'll go right about there. So again, a thin layer of Mod Podge. And if you want to put this at an angle, you can do that. I'm going to put mine on so it's kind of straight, so I'm going to just kind of eyeball that. Press that down a little bit with my fingers. And put a layer of Mod Podge over the top again. Okay, so again, we're going to let this dry. Let it set up till it's dry to the touch so that it's not sticky, it's not cold, it's completely dry. And again, go wash your brush out so that you don't end up with a stiff brush. And we will be back to paint our flower and do some of the finishing touches. So we'll see you in a few minutes again. Thanks. Welcome back. So we're at the stage where we've put our petals on there, we've put Mod Podge over the top, everything is dry. Now we're going to add some color to our flower petals. And how I'm going to do that is with some water-based markers. Now these are just some Crayola water-based markers that my daughter had left here, washable markers. And then what you'll also need is a plastic palette. And this is the same, so think of, the top of a Cool Whip container. Just anything where the color will stay on top of the surface. The other thing you can use if you don't have a plastic lid or anything, you can use the back side of some freezer paper. Anything so that the color won't absorb into it. So I'm going to just generously scribble some of each of these colors of markers on to my palette. And I'm basically going to use these very similar to a watercolor. So I'm using 3 shades. I'm using like a mid-tone yellow, more of a brown yellow, and a brown for the center. On the sample, I'm going to change up my colors this time, but on the sample I had used kind of a peach color and a red color. And then I did a light wash of yellow over the top. And with yellow, you have to be careful. You can go over the tops of reds and pinks, but don't go over the top of purple or you'll end up with brown. So we're going to switch our colors up, and I'm actually going to go with some purples and pinks for this flower on this example. So I've got a light tone purple, that's more of a kind of a purpley pink, a real light, almost lavender purple. And if you don't have all these colors, just water down your main color. So use a little bit of wash of the light color, or mix blues and purples together to get some different shades. So here I've created my palette by just coloring those. Now I've got just a standard paintbrush, and I've got a jug of water here and some paper towel. So to get color like this, you're going to have to layer. So that means layering and layering and layering until you get the intense color that you want for your flowers. So I am going to start with my centerpiece, and I am going to start with yellow. And I am going to kind of try and stay inside the edges of this. I don't want to go too far out because it will actually show up on your background. So I'm going to add again. I'm going to kind of keep layering up, and each time I come in with color, it's actually going to get a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm going to let that yellow just set up just a little bit, and I'm going to work into my purples. So I'm going to start with this lighter one, and I'm going to kind of just lay down, and it looks really light at first. Don't be alarmed about that. Like I said, you're going to have to build the color up. So I'm actually going to go around with this light color. And you don't want too wet a paintbrush. You want enough water that you can move the paint around. And I did try, I thought, okay, what if I just colored directly on these with the marker? And it just left too much of a line. With scribbling it on a palette like this, I felt like I had more control over where I put the color, and it didn't just saturate in. So again, we're going to just kind of keep going around until we've got a base layer of color on all of our petals. So we're going to just keep going here. Okay, I'm going to just paint 3 of these petals just so you kind of get the idea, because otherwise it's going to get really long here. So now I'm going in with my next shade of purple. And I'm not a great shader, but I do know just a little bit about light. So I'm going to kind of gear it that my light is coming from this way, which means my darker edges will be on the back side and at the center in the base here. So that is where I'm going to kind of concentrate more of my darker color. So I'm going to add some of this to each one of these. And if you need more color on your palette, just scribble more color down. Okay, it's kind of handy to keep a paper towel handy in case you go too much off the edge. You can sop it up kind of quick. And it's not that going off the edge is wrong by any means. It's more just kind of the look that you're going for. Okay, so I've kind of got a full layer of the purple, you know, the pinkish purple and then the lighter purple. Okay, I'm going to let that set for just a little bit. I'm going to come back into my yellow. And I'm going to put my darker shade of the brown yellow here. I'm going to try and keep that top edge fairly light. I'm going to kind of just push that down into that area. And again, I'm going to let that sit just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to go into my darkest shade of purple. And this I am going to try and keep to the edge. By adding some shading, you actually will give your flowers a little bit of definition. They're not going to look like they're just flat on the page. Again, I've got a little bit of leaking going on there. I'm going to just kind of smooth that edge a little bit. This one I'm going to kind of concentrate the color kind of down in the center here. And a little bit up on that edge. And I'm going to come in with just a wet paintbrush with water on and kind of just blend that out into the top just a little bit. But trying to keep the more concentrated color down towards the base there. And again, I'll do that with this one. So if my light's coming from this way, now my shadow is going to kind of come down on this bottom edge. So again, I'm going to kind of concentrate my color down in here. I rinse my brush a little bit and just dab it off and then kind of flow that color out just a little bit. And like I said, you can keep layering color. I think I'm going to come back in with that medium tone again. So I'm going to scribble a little bit more on my palette. Up a little bit more of that and kind of go into the medium areas here again. Just add a little touch more of color. And you're kind of just play with this until you get it to look the way you want to. Now we're going to add some defining lines at the very end of this, some black lines to just kind of define that flower and make it stand out a little bit. I'm also going to go back into my center here now with a little bit of brown just to really darken this bottom edge here and really give it some shading. And again, just kind of soften those edges, maybe pick up a little bit more of this lighter yellow. Just kind of work it down in. And this is what I mean by building color up. You just kind of keep going until you get it the way you want it. Now I'm going to take this real light pink color and kind of go over the lighter areas. And this brighter pink is just going to kind of brighten everything up. It's kind of the reason I use the yellow on this one. You do that wash of yellow over the top and it just adds light to the flower. So it doesn't look so one-colored or one-dimensional. So that's why I came in with this light pink. I'm just going to kind of add that lightly over the top. And it's just going to kind of brighten up that purple color and give that flower just a little bit more depth looking. So again, I'm just going to kind of brush this on. And you can always come back in with a little bit darker purple again. Like I said, just play with it till you get it to look the way you want it to. And the only way to do that is just patience and, you know, playing with it. Just kind of keep adding color until you have the depth of color that you want. Come into this last petal with some of that brighter pink. Add a little bit more of that up in here. Just kind of move that around until I get it where I want it. And add just a little bit more of those two colors together in this middle section. And a touch more of the darker one kind of down on this edge here. Okay, so keep going until you get all your petals painted the way you want and that you're pleased with how they look. And then again, set it aside to dry. And we'll come back with some of the last steps that we're going to do. We're going to add our black definition lines with a fine black marker, and then we're also going to add some texture with some of the white acrylic paint that you should still have left, and a screen. So again, finish up your painting, set it aside to dry, and we'll be back. All right, we're back. We have just a couple more steps to finish up before we'll be totally complete with this project. So the next step, we're going to add some texture using a piece of screen, which you'll find in your kit, and some white paint. So the first thing I want to do with the white paint, I'm actually going to do this with my fingers. And I'm just going to dab my finger into some of the white paint and just kind of tap it off. And I'm going to add some like white highlights just to the top edge of these flowers. And this is not going to be perfect. It's supposed to be a little more random, which is why I use my finger. And I'm just going to do this just down the highlight side of these petals. I keep rubbing too hard here. I'm kind of rubbing the paint off, so I need to get just a little bit more on my... So I'm going to kind of do this to all... Turn this so that you can see this. Again, I'm just going to kind of slide that paint down. And sometimes it helps to have your finger just a little bit wet so that paint is a little bit thinner. There we go. Okay, so I've got a little bit more paint there than I want. I'm just going to get my fingertip wet and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. And again, this is mixed media, so nothing is supposed to be perfect. I'm just going to, because I got it just a little bit high there, I am going to just try that one again. There we go. That's more what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm going to do this kind of to all the petals here. Again, I'm just kind of keeping it on that top side. And if you feel better about using a paintbrush for this, that's fine. I kind of like the randomness that my finger gives me to do this. Just kind of smooth that out a little bit. There we go. 2 more petals to go here for this. All right, wipe my finger off a little bit because it's getting just a little bit dry. Let's wipe back a little bit. There we go. And just a little bit on this edge. There. All right. Just going to touch this up a little bit down here by just getting my finger wet and just rubbing it a little bit along that edge. And same with this area here. I just want to soften that up just a little bit so it's not quite so white. Not quite such a hard line. That's the one thing I like, to have that line just a little bit softer. Okay. Next, we are going to take our screen and we are going to start adding some texture. So for this, I'm going to use the sponge brush and I'm going to use the stencil. So I'm just going to place this stencil down and I'm going to get some paint on my brush and I'm just going to dab that through the stencil or through the screening, and it's going to create these little hash mark lines. And I'm just going to move this around, and you want this to be really random. You don't want it to be, you know, wherever you want a little bit of texture. Need a little bit more white paint on here, so just squeeze out a little bit more. Let's put some down in here and a little bit up here. Let's see, a little bit down here. The other thing you can do is paint kind of builds up on this. You can kind of flip it over and almost use it like a stamp and just press it onto your surface, and then that's going to give you a whole nother look. It'll be a little bit lighter, a little bit more textured, not quite as thick with paint. Oh, that one didn't show up very well. Didn't press hard enough. There we go. And so again, this is kind of just a random, wherever you decide you want a little bit of texture. I'm going to flip this over again and put a little bit there. It's kind of fun to use it as a stamp. You also can just press it onto your surface and get some paint on there and then bring it over into your project. Let's put some there and a little bit more there. And I'm going to kind of use it like a stamp. Let's go off the edge a little bit up there. Let's see. right. I think that's pretty good. And again, this is kind of your own, how much or how little you want. I kind of like texture in my stuff, so. All right. So again, we're going to let that dry, and we're going to come back and do our finishing touches. And after this next step, we will be all finished. So again, let your paint dry good, and we'll be back. Okay, we're down to the final 2 steps of our project. So one of the last steps is you're going to take an ultra fine point black Sharpie marker, and we are going to add some definition to the flower petals by drawing some lines, and then hopefully you can see this. I drew kind of a line and then like 3 little dots and a line and 3 little dots, just to not make it one continuous line. However you want to do this. If you want to do dash lines, you can do that. That was just my way of doing it. But it's just going to make that flower stand off the page a little bit more. So I'm just going to take and draw a line, 3 little dots. Actually, my dots are kind of big there. I'm going to make them a little bit smaller here. There we go. That's more what I want. Draw that a little bit longer so it's not just like even on both sides. I'm just going to bring that up to meet that. And all this is going to do is, like I said, just kind of define those flower petals so they stand off the page a little bit more. Come back down this side, my 3 little dots, come back down this side, 3 little dots, and continue down. So you're just going to go around all of the flower petals that way, and the center of the flower. We'll just keep going here until we get all of this complete. All right, I'm going to go around my center here. Again, I'm going to just do some little lines, some little dots. My dots there and connect that final spot. Continue on. There we go. Just about finished. 2 more to go. Not the funnest thing watching me just keep going here, but in order to do the last step, I need to have this step finished. I'm going to continue there. There. Okay, I am going to show you a little bit of a trick. So my first dots there are kind of big. The trick is if you take just a tiny bit of hand sanitizer, I'm just going to dab just a little bit on a paper towel and rub it over that marker, it will kind of take that off. come at this from the side. Take another clean part of the paper towel, a little bit more hand sanitizer. And heaven knows we all have hand sanitizer. But that's actually going to take that marker right off of there. So then I can go back in and fix that. So yeah, if you ever get permanent marker on something, hand sanitizer works really well to take it off. All right, there we go, that's a little bit better. Okay, so our project is pretty well complete. Now we need to seal it. So to do that, you're going to take more Mod Podge and you're going to do a layer over the whole project. And that's just going to kind of seal everything in. So you're just going to take Mod Podge, and you want to be kind of generous with this coat because you want it to seal all your paint. So you almost want it to look kind of cloudy as you're putting this on. And again, watch your edges because you're not going to want big pieces of Mod Podge there. So again, you're going to just put a nice layer. And I kind of work towards the middle, you know, kind of come off the sides. So yeah, sometimes on this part, the thicker the Mod Podge, you don't want it super thick, but it makes it just a little bit easier to go over the whole project. And then I'll kind of just do a smoothing layer with my brush. And we're going to just continue on until we have the whole thing coated with a nice kind of even layer of Mod Podge. And again, this is matte Mod Podge, so it's going to dry to a flat finish. You are going to see a little bit of your brush strokes in there. That is okay. If you don't like the brush strokes, you can kind of smooth them out a little bit with your finger. But with this matte Mod Podge, I think it actually works pretty good that you don't have to, you know, with it not drying shiny, I think that it actually does pretty good. Got some on the sides here, so I'm just going to smooth that out. And I'm going to kind of twist that in my hand so that I can work on this side. Just about done. This is going to seal in all that paint that we put on for the texture. And you might find that a little bit of your purple color or whatever color you colored your leaves might bleed just a tiny bit. It doesn't bleed much, and it kind of blends into the background. So when I get to my flower, I kind of brush in towards the flower and not too much outside of it. But a little bit of purple going through the project is not going to hurt anything. You just don't want it to completely come off the petals. So I kind of go with a light hand, but I can see like right down in here, there's a little bit of purple. But to me, it's just going to blend in with my background. Okay, so that is our project for Make It Monday. I'm going to set my brush down there. So I'm going to actually set this on top of a jar so that it stays up in the air. And I'm going to fix that edge there. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I know it's kind of a long project, but kind of a fun process to go through. If you're interested in more information about mixed media, we do have this book. Hopefully you can see this book available at the library. Kind of a fun read, fun look through to see all the different things that you can do with mixed media. So thanks again for joining me. I hope you had a good time, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.